Sanjeev ji. I don't need to introduce Sanjeev. Please join us. Uh, Bhavna Shah, MPOC Country Director for India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Have I covered all? Please. And Mr. Arun Raste, MD NCDEX. Please join us, sir. So the topic is around policy changes that are happening globally and how India should respond to it and how India has been responding or not responding to it. I'll probably start from second session where Desai raised one good question. What's the cost of not doing anything? To me, we have not been doing anything for 2-3 decades on oil, and now we don't have that choice any longer. We need to react. If you go back to history, when India started import, there were people in government who thought it's a temporary blip. India will become self-sufficient again, and there was no policy to enable that. Later on, in let's say around 2005, 2006, we have been interacting with government ever since. There was a thought process in the government which said, India is such a big country, we cannot be really importing wheat or rice from the globe, and balance sheets are very, very tight. Whereas for oil, it's like a free call option. You know, world is after you to buy oil. And that led us into a state of policy paralysis, if I were to use that word, because we thought oil is available, is always available, and it will be available. We don't have to do anything. People will come, they'll search for buyer and supply to us. We are the buyers, we are the king. And that policy dilemma remained with us till the time we were shaken from slumber last year. Too many things happened in last 2 years. Probably we saw changes to the magnitude which we, at least I had not seen in past 2 decades, we saw in last 2 years. Not in any particular order, but if you see what happened in Indonesia, country producing 50 million ton of oil, their oil prices started to go up for domestic. They had to resort to various changes. There were export duties which were put, DMO was introduced. Even then they could not control, and then came a time where they had to ban the exports. Whether right or wrong, it's a debatable policy intervention, but they struggle with the price. At the same time, we saw Malaysia virtually not doing any major changes, but still managing their situation quite well. So 2 countries, very similar situation, but very different way they wanted to tackle. Malaysia, people acknowledge, has been more consistent. Bhavna, I'm not saying because you are here, but that was the feedback in the government sector, and as players, we acknowledged that there was a certain flow, which was Malaysia, which was uninterrupted. We saw too many changes happening on biodiesel mandates in Europe, in US, in Brazil. Then we saw additional volatility created by Argentine soya dollars. So too many things were happening, and because we didn't react for 2 decades, we were in a situation where our policy making was only reaction to what was happening. There was no proactive policy making, if we were to say, whether it was reduction on duty or implementation of TRQ, taking TRQ back. And it exposed too many players to too much of volatility in the price, as consumer, as supply chain, as industry. It was a turbulent time for 2 years. We made good money, we lost. Not good money, but a lot of money. So that brings us to today's topic, how relevant is to have active policy making rather than a policy making which is more static in nature, something which is more dynamic, which is triggered ahead of time rather than reacting to the policy, reacting to the things on the ground. So I'll start first by posing one question to all 3 panelists, is how do we think India should react to these changes in policies happening globally, and how we think it will affect our existence or growth of industry in years to come. Bhavna, you would like to start, given what Malaysia has demonstrated in terms of stable policy?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gupta. And thank you to the audience who've been waiting patiently. And Even I have been waiting patiently and listening to all the panels very diligently. Now, first and foremost, when you said Malaysia did not do anything, no, no,
Anything
no.
disturbing?
No, my point is, not to do is also a decision not to do. So that was a conscious decision. We have been monitoring the markets. So we value our biggest market, our biggest importers, and we do not believe in short-term gains. So that was a thought process behind that. Now, another one is, you mentioned, thank you. Also, the thing is, now see, if you see Malaysia's progress, it's a small country. Compared to that, India is almost like a continent. Now, Malaysia, if you see, the policies are such forward-driven policy. First of all, oil palm cultivation was not just an oil palm project. It was a poverty alleviation scheme. And that is when the government of Malaysia rolled out such fantastic policies that even the private entities got enticed to enter into it. If you remember, 1970, Malaysia's production was barely like 2 lakh tons. And today, in fact, even till 1990s, we were about 6 to 7 million tons. And today, barring last couple of years, we made it to almost 20 million tons. So it did not happen overnight, but a lot of policy initiatives, a lot of thought process was put behind it. And second thing is, I have been listening to Telangana's policy plan too. Fantastic initiative, and they have been working towards it, and we know they made several visits to Malaysia, Indonesia for oil palm saplings, etc. But one difference in Malaysia is it's taken as a whole big industry. It's not that we'll first cultivate oil palm, once it's ready, then we'll set up industry. Once it's ready, then we'll think about export. It was a whole holistic plan. Number two, the licenses are also so beautifully regulated over there to ensure we do not have excess capacity in a particular area. And to come up with this, it's not just our government who's doing. We have a huge think tank. We have Poram, who looks after the refiners' interest. We have Malaysian Palm Oil Board, who's constantly into research and development. Every dollar that they make, a certain percent of exports goes back into the industry. It goes, a certain percent goes in R&D, a certain percent goes in marketing. Now, when you are talking about Atmanirbhar plan, I have been reading this for a long time. It is beautiful, and I would also want to see India moving towards self-reliance. But what is the money? I mean, where is the money going? Is there any plan for that? We are putting all that profit back into the country. So those things should be looked at in a holistic manner. Don't look at piecemeal thing. Secondly, thirdly, I would say that we also constantly monitor and we come up with our monthly, tariff. Yeah. So stable policies are very, very important. But, well, it's not my place to advise Indian government, but being an advisory member of IVPA, I can advise IVPA about it. No, why don't you put numbers to it? See, you have been recommending stable policies for whatever reason it's not gone through. So every time when the international prices go up or down, why don't you make a policy paper that because of this delay in changing your import duty, the industry has X amount of loss. So make it for us 5 years, and then you can put the numbers over there that look how much of loss, because every time I see something like happens, IVPA, SEA, you go and keep giving recommendations. But by the time the government implements that, the prices have changed altogether. So why don't you put numbers over there, and maybe even after that paper, nothing may happen. But you can at least try. So I think you need to do a lot of self-reflection and come up with a solid case. Because India is 60 to 70% dependent on imports. So any kind of global policy change will keep impacting Indian market. Anything. Also, you see new policies coming in EU. Restrictive policies, restricting in food use, restricting in biodiesel, etc. So obviously that will be shifted, that will be diverted to India, to bigger markets like India and China. So not immediately, but down the line, that would be your leverage point. You said Dobby value, they're not listening. But then when there's no market, you're the only one. So And secondly, you said, how should India react? React is again unpreparedness. Response. You should have a preparedness and a strategy before something like that happens. So my suggestion is, I'm sorry, I've been listening to everyone, so just sharing my thoughts.
Please.
And someone wise has once told me that whenever there's a last panel discussion, first time when you get the mic, complete whatever you have to say, it won't come back to you again.
Some wise man also told me not to take the last session, but I didn't have the choice.
So that is my 2 cents. And if you have any questions, I'll address that later.
Thanks, Bhavna. I just have 3 or 4 comments. One, definitely I don't remember what was Malaysia's production in 1970. I was not born, so I just wanted to let you know, so that the audience should not think that I'm that old. I might look. Second, very right suggestion about industry being on a self-governance mode. And I would like Sanjeev to respond to that, because India is in a stage where we're implementing palm policies. Does it make sense for India to have a regulatory body, self-regulatory body in line of PORAM or anything? So we control the amount of capacities that are coming, the distribution, and the data generation is that more correct. Because today we see a lot of decision making gets impacted because we don't have the right data from the ground. So that, while you are covering the first question, I would also like you to respond to this particular one.
No, sure. So, but just quick response to a complex question. Ideally, yes. If there's a self sort of regulating body, it makes a lot of sense. But my practical sense says that it would be tough because we're too complex a country. Our federated structure makes it additional difficulty. The size of the companies is so diverse. So, you may have 25,000 brands of mustard and groundnut and all that. How do you kind of bring them all onto, at least this was the data, in 80s, late 80s, I used to hear that Saurashtra alone has 25,000 groundnut oil brands. So
Sir, I was asking this more in the context of palm oil, because it's a nascent industry when we are...
So I'm coming to that.
Yeah,
Sorry. I won't take much time. So just as a quick one, the complexity of the industry is such, and the way we are structured in the country, it might be tougher to kind of do that. So there are forums. You've got IVPA, President Saab is here. You've got C, and there are other bodies like SOPA, etc. And what I've found is that they make efforts, but it's difficult. It's too, so my practical sense is probably difficult. Industry should come together. But where industry can play a role and where it does not, is that to the data-based sort of giving inputs, data-based inputs for decision purposes to do the right thing, towards food security or otherwise. I think that industry has been found wanting, and specifically the associations. So that's an unfortunate part. I think we need to build up that credibility, and I can assure that IVPA started coming in, did good stuff earlier last year in that Hyderabad conference that you did. It got taken seriously. So take that momentum forward, hire good researchers, really good substance research has to be there, and then it can certainly come about. I think in the self-regulation of the industry, and then you respect it, and then kind of you can raise the resources also. You can do a whole lot of stuff. So it's a process, but it should be done. It will make sense.
Thank you. You would like to respond to the policy levels before I come to main policy on exchange? I mean, that you can't escape without that question being asked on this forum.
No, so there are 2 or 3 things involved in this. One, we are a country where everybody likes to serve their own interest. And that creates a lot of complexity. If Bhavna is sitting on the other side, in a housewife's role, and if the oil seed price goes up, she'll start cripping. But she's sitting on this side, she'll say, no, you should have 20% more duty. So there are conflicting interests. That is number one. Number two, if you look at Spain or US, they consume 50% more oil per capita than India. And since we are becoming rich, and once we start becoming rich, we start consuming a little more. Just imagine if our edible oil consumption goes up by 50%, what kind of imports we will require? That's number two. Number three, when you're looking at policies, when you're looking at, I would say even a 3-year horizon, forget a long-term policy, even a 3-year horizon, our government doesn't have it. Last 1.5 years or 2 years, my experience is, our government doesn't have it. There are conflicting interests which are pulling the government in different directions, and therefore we can't obviously have it. As I said, it is federated structure, conflicting interests, and conflicting lobbies, to put it mildly. That's number one. Second, the the need for data. Now forget the association giving data. Between the Agri Ministry and DOCA, that is Department of Consumer Affairs, and food, the data doesn't match. Yeah. You know, so that is the biggest problem at this juncture in this country, the agri stack or wherever, whatever you're looking at. We have started working with government on those, but we don't have data which can at least give us projections. Third, a very interesting thing, how would a farmer know what he needs to do? So last year's typical case before the ban came in, soybean farmers, they were expecting that when they harvest their crop, they will get about 10,000 rupees a quintal. And when they were sowing, actually that was the rate. But when they harvested, it came down to 6,000. Now, how would you tell that same soybean farmer to next year again go and sow soybean? So if you want to have consistent, growth for a farmer and a farmer to earn income, you have to tell him at least for next year, this is likely to be demand. And based on that demand, likely projections for prices. And therefore, your income will be X or Y. And then you'll be in a position to sow that particular crop. But that doesn't happen. So our agri department or, except for, wheat procurement, which is possibly on MSP, nowhere else the government has the data in terms of how much they need to procure. It's just right now, because the mustard is going below MSP and Rajasthan is likely to go for elections, they'll start procuring. So that's a very, I wouldn't say scientific way of doing it, but unfortunately, that is how the fact is. And what we will require is, for 3 years, all the interest groups, they keep their differences aside, let policymakers make policies which are consistent, which are long-term, and then everybody can start pulling whichever way direction they want to be.
So, I'll not be mistaken if I take one comment when you're saying soybean farmers seeing a price of 100 and then getting a 60, you are obviously alluding to the role of exchange in enabling some sort of price signals to the farmer. And that's a matter of debate we have with policymakers as to what's the role of exchange. Is it actually helping the price to go up or down, or it's just a barometer showing the temperature of the current S&D of a particular crop? People would have different view, but we would like you to probably give your understanding. I know you have conducted one study also on this. So some bit of light on that. And then probably I would request you and Sanjeev both to comment as to how we can, assuming exchange starts working again on oil seeds and pulses, how can we enable farmer to take advantage of the prices that he sees? Today, it's one thing to show the price to the farmer. Second is to enable him to take advantage of that. Both are equally important. If they are not happening, then we are just doing a lip service saying, we are showing the price to the farmer, but we are not enabling him to take that advantage. So I will leave both of you to respond.
Just one simple terms, the future price is your current price plus the cost of carry. So it could be the warehouse rent, it could be the money which you are invested in, the interest on that, and the risk which you are taking. Put together, whatever is the difference, that is the difference between your spot price, that is today's price, and future price. Now, this is a very easy thing which we have been telling the government time and again, and various studies have been done on that. Now, the counter argument is, if you know what the future price is, even your today's spot price is manipulated, and therefore we want to ban your future. Now, it is like, whether you want to put your cart in front of your horse, and that is something which happens when they want to ban it. There is no logic, there is no scientific reason to ban it, but this is how it happens.
Sir, you have not still answered. What do you think of whether exchange decide the price or not, and how easy or not easy is to manipulate? In a perfect market, it should not be as easy for anyone to manipulate, and especially in all seeds when your prices are linked globally.
It cannot be done. If it's globally, you cannot do it in the domestic markets.
I'll just say how the farmers can be done. It's a tall order. Not easy, because farmers, even the regular business for the FPOs to happen through the routine trade itself is so problematic. But having said that, NCDEX had taken a lead long back and has been working very closely. I think educating farmers, farmer groups, ensuring maybe creating some fund for them to take the risk if they start to get the benefit. One thing is certain, that the farmers tend to own up things if they see the real value in it instantly. And I think that, unfortunately, has been one missing element, which we could certainly look at supporting. And I think their corporates and likes of NCDEX or NSE or BSE or any exchange, or even companies like us, I think we can play a huge role. We've got 150 FPOs. So that I'm certainly keen on, that the ones who trade, I think how they can participate in exchange, provided the damn exchange starts. So, in terms of how do we de-risk them, how do we give them additional income? And I think if we can prove it, both to the government and otherwise, that there's a great merit in doing that, then I think NCDEX, I've been talking on all forums to the government all the time, that it has to start immediately. So there's no option, other than doing it. Otherwise, ridiculous state in India that we have.
I was just calculating, we import, let's say, total consumption of oil is about 23 million ton. So you're talking about, at $1,000, you're talking about 23 billion worth of oil. And even if you take a pipeline of 45 days to 2 months, you're talking about 4 to 5 billion $4 to $5 billion of unhedged exposure to the industry. And at the same time, we are blocking our domestic exchanges and we are encouraging players in India to go overseas to hedge. We are making it easier for them to hedge abroad. So there seems to be some dichotomy in terms of what policies they really want to implement. I know we had a very short time, so we'll need to cut short this panel. But sir, thanks a lot for participating in this panel and giving your views. And really sorry for cutting it too short, but last panel, we didn't have a choice. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have a policy on food security, like how China does? And can we look into having oil as a security reserve?
We have National Food Security Mission, massive amounts allocated.
Yeah, but we don't have physical stocks.
Edible oil security is not, it's just
Yeah.
grains.
Yeah, so if we can have such a facility, you can navigate,
Absolutely right.
right? No? And
Last year it was suggested to the government that they should build some emergency stock or the buffer stock for oil. But then we also realized probably last year was not the time to start building that buffer stock. So probably if I don't hazard against in today's market, but we might be close to that level.